everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Alex and today I'm going to be talking about some of my most surprising and most disappointing reads of 2019. So for one of my end of the year videos, I wanted to take a minute and talk about some of the books that surprised me the most and the ones that disappointed me the most. So I have 5 books on each list, 10 books total that we're going to be talking about today. Before we get into the books, if you are new here and you're not already, be sure to go down and hit the subscribe button as well as the bell icon down below so that you never miss out on any of my content. Without further ado, let's get started. So I want to end on a positive note, so I'm going to start with 5 of my most disappointing reads of the year. And before I even get into this, I want to put a disclaimer. Just because I was disappointed in a book doesn't necessarily mean that I hated it. Most of the time, it just means that I went in expecting one thing and got something different. Now, I have quite a few that could make it onto this list, but I'm going to narrow it down to 5. Now, these are in no particular order, but the first one that I'm going to talk about is Everything Leads to You by Nina LaCour. Now, this book is a contemporary female-female romance that follows our main character, Emmy. And Emmy is a set designer. She wants to go to Hollywood and pursue that as a career, and she is starting out in the field. And she goes to this estate sale of a really, really famous actor that has just passed away. And she winds up finding a mysterious letter, and she has to go on this mission to deliver the letter. But this is one that I had heard a lot of really positive reviews about, and just one that I thought was really interesting. And unfortunately, it just didn't hit the mark for me. There was nothing inherently wrong with this book, it just didn't do, I guess, what I wanted it to do. I wasn't completely convinced by the romance. Like I said, it is a female-female romance, which I was really excited for, and it was okay. It just wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. I didn't really like the development of it. I didn't think there was much development, and the rest of the plot, I felt like Emmy, even though she's supposed to be a senior in high school, she felt a lot more childish than that, and just in general, pretty much everything about this book, I was just let down. So I really thought that I was going to give this a 5-star, and it wound up being a 3 out of 5 star. The next book I want to talk about is Again But Better by Christine Riccio. Now, this book follows our main character, Shane, and Shane is in college and she feels like she has been doing college all wrong. She doesn't have any friends. She feels like she's generally going down the wrong path. So she decides to spend a summer studying abroad in London to hopefully turn all of that around. I was really excited to read this novel because I've been following Christine for a while now, as I know a lot of us have. I watched all of her videos going through the entire process, very beginning of even just starting to think about the plot of Again But Better, all the way up to getting published. I was so excited to see what she was going to have to do and have to say, and unfortunately, again, this just missed the mark for me. I feel like the plot was really, really interesting and something that I wanted to explore. It's not often that you see somebody that is in college or a little bit older in the space that we typically read in, but I felt like Shane was incredibly childish. I could not get behind some of the decisions that she made. Just the way that she talked didn't sound like things that a 21-year-old would be saying. I just couldn't get behind it. One other thing that really bothered me in this book was the majority of this book takes place in 2011, and Christine does not want you to forget that. There are so many random pop culture references to things that were happening in 2011, and it was cool the first couple times, just like remembering back and having that nostalgia, but then eventually it got to the point where I'm like, yeah, I get it. We're in 2011. It's really not that important that we're in 2011. This could really happen at any point in time, but you just really, for some reason, you need us to know that this is happening in 2011, and that just really grinded my gears. So overall, even though I don't feel like this was so strong of a debut, I will definitely be reading more from Christine in the future, but unfortunately this wasn't what I wanted it to be, and I wound up giving it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Now, another one, and probably one of the more controversial on this list, is The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay. Now, this novel is a horror novel that follows our main character, 7-year-old Wen, and her parents, Eric and Andrew. They have taken a retreat to this cabin. They're just going to take a vacation, get away from the world, and all of a sudden this group shows up and says that they have the ability to save the world, but they will have to make an unimaginable sacrifice. Now, this is marketed as a horror novel, and I've heard so many reviews that say that this book made them so anxious and it was so horrific and they just couldn't wait to see what was happening next, but I did not feel any of those things from this novel. There were definitely suspenseful moments in here, and I loved the dynamic of never being able to tell who was telling the truth. I felt like that was really interesting, and I wanted to get to some real conclusion at the end, but the ending of this is actually pretty ambiguous, and it was not satisfying for me. It really fell flat, and just in general, even though there were suspenseful moments, this overall wasn't as suspenseful as I wanted it to be, especially with it being marketed as a horror novel. So again, this one's middle of the road. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. Another disappointing read for me this year was Forever by Judy Blume. Now, essentially, this novel came out in the 1970s, and it was one of the first big young adult novels that dealt with the topic of sex. Now, I did know that going in, and I don't know exactly what I expected out of this book, but it did not give me what I was expecting. There were definitely some scenes in this novel that I completely appreciated. Like, there is one scene where the main character goes and gets on the birth control pill. I feel like that was incredibly well done. It's something that needs to be more present in literature even today, and it was definitely revolutionary for Judy Blume to go and write a book like this. I can 100% see where this book would have been revolutionary and so vital for young women to have it in the 1970s, but I just really don't think that it stood up to the test of time. The main character's boyfriend, Michael, did a lot of things and behaved in a lot of certain ways that I really did not agree with. I think that it would not have flown by an editor today. A lot of his behavior is just simply not okay today, and I feel like in the 70s it wasn't as strict as it was today, but I totally did not agree with his character multiple times throughout the novel. And just in general, I did not vibe with the writing style. That's just a personal preference of mine. I did not enjoy the way that this was written. Some people might really like it, I really didn't. So while I can appreciate this book in the context of its original release, again, don't think it stood up to the test of time. I was pretty disappointed by it, and I gave it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And the last one I'm going to talk about, this one's actually probably the least most disappointing, so I was still disappointed, but not as much as some of these others, but that is Aurora Rising by Jake Kristoff and Amy Kaufman. Now, this one is completely my own fault why I was so disappointed by it. These two authors are the authors of the Illuminae Files, which is a trilogy that I absolutely adore, and I know so many other people do as well. I was hoping that this one would be just as good as Illuminae, and unfortunately, it just wasn't. But this is a sci-fi novel, and we start out following our main character, Tyler, who is a star pupil at the Space Academy, and on the day that he is supposed to recruit his fleet, he actually winds up kind of getting sidetracked by a different mission, and he winds up getting a fleet that's just made up of the people at the bottom of the barrel, this ragtag team of individuals, and they wind up just going on this crazy adventure trying to save the universe. Now again, I really enjoyed this one. I gave this a 4 stars. I think it was a really good read, and I will 100% be continuing the series. I was just disappointed by it because it wasn't up to Illuminae standards. One thing that I really commend Amy and Jay on is the fact that you can't tell who is who when they're writing. If I didn't know before I went into it, I wouldn't be able to tell that there are 2 different authors writing any of their novels, so I definitely commend them on that. And the worlds are so complex and the characters are unique and they all fit together so well. You can tell that these authors really take their time and think everything through when they're creating their stories. And like I said, I really enjoy this one. Will definitely be continuing. Just wasn't quite up to Illuminae. So now on the flip side, we're going to talk about 5 of the most surprising books of the year. So these are ones that I either didn't expect to like and I did like them, or ones that maybe I thought that I would like and they were like incredible. The first one I'm going to start out with is Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. Now, this book follows our main character, 17-year-old Audrey Rose, who is a perfect prim and proper girl by day, but by night she is incredibly passionate about forensic science. She works in the laboratory with her uncle, and they wind up finding themselves involved in the Jack the Ripper case. Now, this is one that I have definitely heard some hype about, but nobody seems to really give it 5 stars. Everybody agrees that it's good, but not great, so that's what I expected going into it. And this one really blew me away. There is an adorable hate-to-love romance in this that I totally did not think I was going to be on board with at the beginning, but by the end of it, I was completely convinced. Absolutely love the love interest in this story. I also really appreciate the main character. She is such a total badass all the way through the story. She is so cool, and she can handle herself, and she is just everything that I wanted from a main character. I also think that the historical setting of this was really well done, and the plot twists are intricate and they are timed perfectly, and just in general, this is the start to, I think, what's going to be an incredible series that I cannot wait to continue. So while I thought that this one was just going to be okay, I actually wound up giving it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Another book I want to mention is The Nowhere Girls by Amy Reed. So this story starts off following our main character, Grace, and her family has just moved from Kentucky up to Oregon. Now, the house that Grace moved into used to be occupied by a girl named Lucy. Lucy was actually raped by a group of boys at her school, and after she came out and accused these boys, basically nobody believed her and the whole town turned against her, so she and her family moved away. Grace connects with 2 classmates, Rosina and Erin, and they wind up starting this group called the Nowhere Girls, where they are trying to connect with other girls in their school and expose these boys for their behavior. Now, this is another one that I thought was going to be a really good read, but I didn't realize on the surface how incredibly important this novel would be, and I do not think that it's talked about enough. First of all, the writing in this is just beautiful. It's not overly flowery, so it's a quick one to get through, but there's still enough there to keep you interested. The characters in this are so dynamic. The 3 main characters all all work so well together, but they have their own distinct personalities, and you get to see them together and apart, and all of the storylines are equally intriguing. There is also so much diversity in this book that I did not realize going in. Grace is fat, and she talks a lot about her Christian faith throughout the novel. Rosina is Mexican and queer, and Aaron has a disability that I'm not sure if it was ever exactly named, but I believe that it falls along the lines of autism or Asperger's. This is just a story that I was so impacted by. I usually don't read books on vacation, and I read this on vacation, and it was incredible to just be able to go with these characters. There's so much covered in here, and there are so many hard-hitting topics in this book that I was afraid it was going to feel bogged down, but it was done perfectly. It was paced well. Every conversation in this novel is so well done and just woven together beautifully. So if you are interested in a hard-hitting contemporary and you haven't picked this one up yet, please don't let it fly under the radar. Next, I'm going to talk about An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. Now, this book follows our main character, 23-year-old April May, and she lives in New York City. One night in the middle of the night, she is walking home and she comes upon this giant robot statue type thing that she dubs Carl. She winds up taking a video with it and posting it online, and it goes viral the next day when it comes to be found that there are all of these Carls popping up all over the planet. Nobody knows where they have come from, and now it's up to April to deal with her sudden viral fame. The one thing that really struck me about this novel was that it was written so well that it's really hard for me to believe that this is a debut. The writing style was exactly what I like. It was kind of straightforward, but there were still quirky moments in there that just made it more relatable and down to earth. I really appreciated it. Thought the pacing was done really well. The characters are all fantastic. We get great bisexual representation in here, and I loved seeing a main character that was still relatable to the YA audience but was a little bit older. I also definitely think that the conversation in this book about social media and viral fame and online fame was really interesting and important and done really well in the context of the story. This is one that I definitely thought I would enjoy, but I didn't think that it would make it onto my top books of the year list, and it probably will. Actually, the day before I'm filming this, Hank Green officially announced the sequel, which I am so excited about. It comes out in July of next year. Absolutely cannot wait for it. This book was an easy 5 out of 5 stars and one of the most surprising of the year. I also have to talk about Grave Mercy by Robin Lefevre's. Now, this book follows our main character, Ismay, and it takes place in, I think, 13th or 14th century Brittany. Now, Ismay escapes a really brutal arranged marriage and finds herself at this convent where the nuns essentially teach her to be a daughter of death. At the beginning of the novel, she gets an assignment that takes her into the High Court of Brittany, where she discovers all of the political happenings going on behind the scenes and finds herself a little too involved. Now, this was another one that I have heard a couple of people mention, but not a lot, and especially because this is a little bit of an older title. It has been under the radar for a little while. I'd heard the name here and there and really just decided to pick it up on a whim, and this book was addictive as heck. The setting is really dynamic, which I did not expect. Usually, I like historical fiction, but 13th, 14th, 15th century really isn't my thing, but this was so cool. The setting was really well done. The political intrigue was so there, and it was some of the best politics that I've ever read in a novel. There is a little tiny romance that I was so behind and I'm obsessed with, and I need more of it right now. The plot twists were great. There's lots of cool actions. Ismay is a badass. Just in general, this was so well done. I really need to continue the rest of the series, but if you haven't picked this one up yet and you like historical fiction, I feel like not enough people have read this one, and it really surprised me. This is another one that I wound up giving a 5 out of 5 stars. And the last surprising book that I'm going to talk about today is The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain. Now, this novel starts out in 1970, and we follow our main character, Caroline. Now, less than a year before the start of the novel, Caroline loses her husband in the Vietnam War, and right after she loses him, she finds out that she's pregnant. So when the novel starts out, she's about halfway through her pregnancy, and she gets the devastating news that her doctors say they have found something wrong with her baby and it is going to be fatal, and there's nothing they can do to try to save the child. Now, obviously, Caroline is absolutely devastated at having to suffer another loss, but her brother-in-law comes to her and says, listen, I know you're not going to believe me, and this sounds insane, but in 2001, there is a procedure that they can do on your child to save its life, and I know how to send you there. Now, this is a novel that, again, I thought I would like, but it totally blew me away with how incredible it was. Even at the start of this novel, I was going through and I liked it, and I thought it was going to be pretty good, maybe like a 3.5 or a 4 star, and I thought that I knew where the plot was going, and then there was a twist, and then there were more twists, and then there were more twists, and I just was on the edge of my seat. This is one that I listened to on an audiobook, and I found myself looking for excuses to listen to it. I was like, oh, I need to go to the gym. That way I can listen to the book on the way and at the gym, and then I need to do laundry so that I could listen to the book, because I could not put this book down. The book was interesting all the way through, but it really kicked off. I got gripped at about 25%, and I just flew through the rest of it. Now, especially if you are a wife or a mother, I think that you will be impacted by this novel, but even if you aren't, this is one that I think everybody can get into. There's the time travel, there's the sci-fi, there's the historical fiction. I really do think that there's a little bit of something for everybody in this novel, and it was so good. So again, if you're looking for that, haven't picked it up, go do it. This one really, really surprised me. So that is it for 5 of my most surprising and most disappointing books of the year. If you have read any of these books, let me know your thoughts on them in the comments down below, and give me one of your most surprising and one of your most disappointing. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to go down and give it a big thumbs up, as well as hitting the subscribe button and the bell icon down below so that you never miss out on any of my content. So until next time, bye!